Everybody enjoys speaking and being together. We decide things, but they don't get done. We were going to have water brought from the stream and left in those coconut shells under fresh leaves. So it was for a few days. Now there's no water, the shells are dry, people drink from the river. There was a murmur of assent. Not that there's anything wrong with drinking from the river. I mean, I'd soon have water from that place, the pool where the waterfall is, than out of the old coconut shell. Only we said we'd have the water brought, and now not. There were only 2 full shells there this afternoon. He licked his lips. Then there's huts, shelters. The murmur swelled again and died away. You mostly sleep in shelters. Tonight, except for Sam and Eric, up by the fire, you'll all sleep there. Who built the shelters? Clamor rose at once. Everyone had built the shelters. Ralph had to wave the conch once more. Wait a minute! Who built all 3? We all built the first one, 4 of us the second, and me and Simon built the last one over there. That's why it's tottery. No, don't laugh. That shelter might fall down if the rain comes. We'll need those shelters then. He paused and cleared his throat. There's another thing. We chose those rocks right along beyond the bathing pool as a lavatory. That was sensible too. The tide cleans the place up. The little ones know about that. There were sniggers here and there and swift glances. Now people seem to use anywhere. Even near the shelters and the platform. You little ones, you're getting fruit and you're taken short. The assembly roared. So the little ones are the ones that are between 5 and probably 8 or 9. And they are supposed to be using the bathroom further away from their living space, but they're not. And so that's what taking short means. And he just really makes them distracted and they're not paying attention even more so now because they're laughing. Let's see. There were sniggers here and there and swift glances. Now people seem to use anywhere, even near the shelters and the platform. You little ones, you're getting fruit. If you're taken short, the assembly roared. I said, if you're taking short, you keep away from the fruit. That's dirty. Laughter rose again. I said that's dirty. He plucked at his stiff gray shirt. That's really dirty. If you're taken short, you go right along the beach to the rocks. See? Piggy held out his hand for the conch, but Ralph shook his head. His speech was planned point by point. We've all got to use the rocks again. This place is getting dirty. He paused. The assembly, sensing a crisis, was tensely expectant. And then, about the fire, Ralph let out his spare breath with a little gasp that was echoed by his audience. Jack started to chip a piece of wood with his knife and whispered something to Robert, who looked away. The fire is the most important thing on the island. How can we ever be rescued? Except by luck if we don't keep a fire going. Is a fire too much for us to make? He flung out an arm. Look at us. How many are we? And yet we can't keep a fire going to make smoke. Don't you understand? Can't you see we ought to die before we let the fire out? There was a self-conscious giggling among the hunters. Ralph turned on them passionately. You hunters, you can laugh, but I tell you the smoke is more important than the pig. However often you kill one. Do all of you see? He turned, spread his arms wide, and turned to the whole triangle. We've got to make smoke up there or die. He paused, feeling for his next point. And another thing, someone called out. Too many things! There came a mutter of agreement. Ralph overrode them. And another thing, we nearly set the whole island on fire, and we waste time rolling rocks and making little cooking fires. Now I say this, and I make it a rule because I'm chief. We won't have a fire anywhere but on the mountain, ever. There was a row immediately. Boys stood up and shouted, and Ralph shouted back. Because if you want a fire to cook fish or crab, you can jolly well go up the mountain. That way we'll be certain. Hands were reaching for the conch in the light of the setting sun. He held on and leapt on the trunk. All this I meant to say. Now I've said it. You voted me chief. Now you do what I say. They quieted it slowly, and at last were seated again. Ralph dropped down and spoke in his ordinary voice. So remember, the rocks for a lavatory. That's the restroom. Keep the fire going and smoke showing as a signal. Don't take fire from the mountain. Take your food up there. Jack stood up, scowling in the gloom, and held out his hands. I haven't finished yet. But you've talked and talked. I've got the conch. Jack sat down, grumbling. Then the last thing. This is what people can talk about. He waited till the platform was very still. Things are breaking up. I don't understand why. We began well. We were happy. And then he moved the conch gently, looking beyond them at nothing, remembering the beastie, the snake, the fire, the talk of fear. Then people started getting frightened. A murmur, almost a moan, rose and passed away. Jack had stopped whittling. Ralph went on abruptly. But that's little one's talk. We'll get that straight. So the last part, the bit we can all talk about, is kind of deciding on the fear. The hair was creeping into his eyes again. We've got to talk about this fear and decide there's nothing in it. I'm frightened myself sometimes, only that's nonsense. Like bogies. Then when we've decided, we can start again and be careful about things like the fire. A picture of the three boys walking along the bright beach flitted through his mind. And be happy. Ceremonially, Ralph laid the conch on the trunk beside him as a sign that the speech was over. What sunlight reached them was level. Jack stood up and took the conch. So this is a meeting to find out what's what. I'll tell you what's what. You little ones started all this with the fear talk. Beasts. Where from? Of course we're frightened sometimes, but we put up with being frightened. Only Ralph says you scream in the night. What does that mean but nightmares? Anyway, you don't hunt or build or help. You're a lot of crybabies and sissies. That's what. And as for the fear, you'll have to put up with that like the rest of us. Ralph looked at Jack open-mouthed, but Jack took no notice. The thing is, fear can't hurt you any more than a dream. There aren't any beasts to be afraid of on this island. He looked along the row of whispering little ones. Serve you right if something did get you. You useless lot of crybabies. But there is no animal. Ralph interrupted him testily. What is all this? Who said anything about an animal? You did the other day. You said they dream and cry out. Now they talk. Not only the little ones, but my hunters sometimes. Talk of a thing, a dark thing, a beast, some sort of animal I've heard. You thought not, didn't you? Now listen, you don't get big animals on small islands, only pigs. You only get lions and tigers in big countries like Africa and India and the zoo. I've got the conch. I'm not talking about the fear. I'm talking about the beast. Be frightened if you like, but as for the beast, Jack paused, cradling the conch, and turned to his hunters with their dirty black caps. Am I a hunter, or am I not? They nodded simply. He was a hunter, all right. No one doubted that. Well then, I've been all over this island by myself. If there were a beast, I'd seen it. Be frightened because you're like that. But there is no beast in the forest. Jack handed back the conch and sat down. The whole assembly applauded him with relief. Then Piggy held out his hand. I don't agree with all Jack said, but with some. Of course there isn't a beast in the forest. How could there be? What would a beast eat? Pig. We eat pig. Piggy! I got the conch, said Piggy indignantly. Ralph, they ought to shut up, oughtn't they? You shut up, you little uns. What I mean is that I don't agree about this here fear. Of course there isn't nothing to be afraid of in the forest. Why, I've been there myself. We'll be talking about ghosts and such things. We know what goes on, and if there's something wrong, there's someone to put it right. He took off his glasses and blinked at them. The sun had gone as if the light had been turned off.